Well,
Good afternoon, Friday afternoon, good hour of Shabbos. Hope you're doing well. And looking forward to learning a little bit with you today in preparation of Shabbos, this Shabbos versus Vayechi. We're going to do a Rashi from the sixth Aliyah today. In the sixth Aliyah of the Parsha, we actually see the instructions and perhaps the permission given by Paro for Yosef to go bury his father in the land of Israel. It's an important piece of the process. This, of course, comes with a lot of warnings from Yosef to the brothers and not to fight and not to get overly involved in discussion and altir gazu baderech, all kinds of fascinating features of the journey that the brothers take with their father to bury him back in the land of Israel. And it's not a simple thing, especially knowing that you're coming back to exile, back to Galus, to take that trip and to actually go visit the place where you're supposed to be is a very painful and difficult experience that can arouse many different kinds of emotions. But what's interesting is in the original command, so to speak, the Torah says, Vayasu banav lo, Cain, kasher tzivam. That his children, Yaakov's children, do to him, lo, Cain, this way, kasher tzivam, as he commanded them. So Rashi says here, kasher tzivam, mahu asher tzivam. So we never see any particular instructions other than the fact that he wanted to be buried in Israel. We never see particular instructions about how it's done or what they're supposed to do. So what is the kasher tzivam, which hasn't been spelled out thus far to us in the Torah? So Rashi says it's spelled out in the very next pasuk. What they actually do in fulfilling his wishes, when the Torah says kasher tzivam, what it's really telling us is we don't know what Yaakov told them. We never heard about it explicitly, but now that you see them fulfilling his wishes, all the details that they implement in fulfilling his wishes, the Torah is telling us are kasher tzivam, are being followed in that way because that's exactly how he commanded them to do it. It wasn't random, it wasn't their own choice. This was exactly as he asked it to be fulfilled. So what does that look like? Vayisuoso banav artza Canaan. His children carried him artza Canaan. Vayikbruoso b'ras machpelah asher kanav rametzedeh l'chuzos kaver meis Efron achiti al pnei mamre. They bury him in Sdei Machpelah, which is the area that Avram had bought from Efron achiti near Mamre. So Rashi darshans a couple of pieces. I want to point out two things in Rashi. Number one, he says, Vayisuoso banav. The Torah specifies not just generally Vayisuoso, but Vayisuoso banav. Not only Vayasu vanav, but Vayisuoso vanav. Vanav are mentioned twice in the span of these two psukim. Not only the children carry out the command to make sure he was buried in Israel, but the children specifically were the ones that carried his body to Canaan themselves. Why? Why does the Torah specify that? To tell us, v'lo b'nei vanav, that really it was the children and not the grandchildren who carried him. Why? Shekach tivam, because this must have been what Yaakov had commanded them. Al yisu mitasi lo ish mitzri v'lo echad mibnechem shehem mibnos Canaan. Ella atem. He says, make sure when you take me to be buried that no one carries my bier, my coffin, not an Egyptian person, not even one of your children, because your children are the offspring, yes, of you, but also of your Canaanite wives. As opposed to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, who married very specifically. Yaakov goes to Lavan's house to find a wife. He marries Rachel, he marries Leah. The children of Yaakov marry other people. They marry Benos Canaan. And Benos Canaan still had a tainted nature to themselves, even at this time, even after they had married into the family. And although they may have come along for the ride and been proper members of the family at this point, because of their lineage, because of their associations, Yaakov says he prefers not to be buried by anyone associated with them, including his own grandchildren. It's a very jarring statement, very jarring observation by Rashi. For a person to say specifically that there's some pagam, there's some fault in his grandchildren, especially a fault of lineage, pretty extreme statement. But I think it teaches us about just how important the idea of marriage was and marrying the right person. We see that, of course, in the way Avram conveys to Eliezer about how he's supposed to find a wife for Yitzchak, and how Yaakov finds a wife that is pleasing to his parents. Esau finds wives in Canaan that are not pleasing to his parents, etc., etc. we see that this is very, very important, and it continues to be important until his deathbed. In addition to that, the second point which Rashi makes, which I find is really interesting, is that he says, what does it mean that the children carried them, kasher tzivam? The children carried the coffin as he commanded them. Not only is it them as opposed to anyone else, but specifically the way they carried it is also commanded by Yaakov. Kavalahem makom. He set a place. Shlosha lamizrach, chen la'arba ruchos, 3 of his children on each of the sides. V'kesidran lemasa umachna shel degalim nikveu kan. The whole order of travel, the whole way that the tribes would be encamped in the desert after a couple of 100 years from now, when they leave Egypt, is the way that he set it out for the tribes right now. So this original journey of the tribes from Mitzrayim to Eretz Israel, carrying his coffin, is structured in the exact same way as the ultimate journey of the Jewish people as a nation would take place from Mitzrayim to Eretz Israel. Levi lo yisa shu asid l'aseh, not only their formation, but Levi was not included because, of course, he was the middle of the camp. Levi was surrounding the Mishkan in the middle eventually once they encamped in the desert, and he was busy carrying the various aspects of the Mishkan, including the Aron. Yosef lo yisa shu melech. In this case, Yosef's not carrying because he's a king. Menashe ve'Ephraim yu tachteim, but Menashe and Ephraim do replace Yosef, which is, of course, true in the ultimate encampment of the Jewish people as well. V'zehu, this is what it says later on in Parshas Bamidbar, when they actually create the encampment, ish al diglo be'osos. It says over there that every person is by their flag in their rightful place, be'osos, according to their signs. Now, what is the difference between a degel and an os? The degel is the os. So it must be over there that al diglo means according to his sign, his emblem, his flag, his color. But be'osos, according to the signs, is not the signs of their tribe, but the signs that Yaakov had given his children in the original encampment when they carried his body to Eretz Yisrael. Be'osos ba'os shemaser lehem aviam lemasa mitaso. It's the sign that he gave and he transferred over to his children about how to carry his coffin, and he continued that to ask them to pass that along for future generations so they would know how to encamp in the ultimate journey. It's very interesting because it helps to explain what Be'osos is in Parshas Bamidbar. It's also very beautiful in terms of the continuity of saying that the whole encampment was not a new thing. It was something that was started earlier. It's already a Mesorah, a heritage from Yaakov. But in addition to all of that, I think it reinforces another idea, which we start to see generally with the Avos, specifically the Ramban points it out, but other people point it out as well. The whole concept of Maisa Avos Siman Labanim, that what happened to the previous generation is something that's going to happen to future generations. All of these events are foreshadowing. So here you see a prime example of that. The way that they carried it now is a foreshadowing of the way they're going to carry it eventually. That concept of Maisa Avos Siman Labanim is generally true from the time of Avram and going forward, but it's even more specifically true when it has to do with the descent to Egypt or the return to Israel. Because what it does, it sets out for us a paradigm of exile and redemption. Many of the ways and features of Yaakov's tribe's descent to Egypt and ascent to Israel are repeated later on in terms of the totality of the Jewish people. The way they're enslaved, the way they're released, the way they journey back. So this journey of redemption, so to speak, from Egypt back to Israel is a foreshadowing of the ultimate redemption of the Jewish people from Egypt that is yet to come, especially in terms of the formation of how they were encamped, reminiscent of these original times as well. And I don't know how it'll be in the future times. I don't think we'll have an encampment of tribes in the same way around the Mikdash in Yerushalayim or on the flights from all around the world to Israel in the time of Mashiach, or however we're going to get there. But we'll see how that manifests itself one day, hopefully very soon in our time. Have a great Shabbos, everyone.
You too, Rabbi, everybody.
Rabbi.
Shabbos
Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat shalom.
Hopefully they won't have red countries by
Yeah, I hope so. By then, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.